Okay, who's all having a good time so far? All right, awesome. Good to hear. So, this is one of the talks that I'm looking forward to the most. Matt Fisher, um, he was a intern for us at Ruoff Mortgage last year, um, and just did such an amazing job that I was able to have conversations with leadership. Saying like, "Hey, he's going to have to physically go back to Purdue, back to school in the fall, but we really need to somehow retain this guy. Just because of the value that he's giving our company." And thankfully, we were able to keep him on board on a part-time basis. And it worked out, yeah, really well, definitely for us. Um, this particular talk that he's going to give, he told me this story after the interview process. And I told him, I was like, man, if you would have mentioned this batch script that you wrote that, had role-based access controls and had like a built-in game all written in the batch language, like that would have been an instant hire. Like there would have been no question. You just would have been hired on the spot. So anyways, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Matt.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah. Also, thanks, Paul, for organizing everything here. He's done such a great job. He did this a year ago in planning. So I think he said about 10 hours a week for about the last year. That's a lot of planning. So, all right, well, let's get started. I'm Matt Fisher. I'm a cybersecurity student out at Purdue. I've got my family back in the audience and my lovely girlfriend. So normally they embarrass me, so it's my turn to actually embarrass them. So look at them and wave. So yeah, I'm talking about a solution to a high school no phone policy written in batch. And this is actually a word cloud of the program. Okay, first things first. This is my first talk for anything in cybersecurity. So I'm gonna take a selfie with you guys if you guys don't mind. I gotta keep this one. So go ahead and smile for me. Cow says smile. All right, thanks. Okay, so we tried a few things, right? We're in middle school, we got our first phones, and we want to talk to our friends because school's boring. So we tried the whole phone behind the book method. That really didn't work out too well. We tried the whole phone inside the sleeve method. Also didn't really work. And over time, we kind of tried a few different things, passing notes, and nothing was just good enough. So being me, we had the perfect storm. So we were actually the first class in our middle school to be given laptops. So the IT team at school had no idea what the students were going to do. And additionally, we had nothing but free time in school because who's actually listening to the teachers anyway? And then the school also had to use batch scripts because in order to do their group policy for Active Directory, they had to run this script every time you log in. And so they can't actually block you from running batch programs. And finally, Minecraft, as weird as that is, being in middle school, having your own Minecraft server was kind of like a thing of clout. So I learned how to use batch and make a Minecraft server. And that kind of started off the whole just downhill spiral that became this program. Yeah, leading to some interesting outcomes. So how it started, it was literally 4 lines across 2 programs. So basically a program that would write some lines out into a file and another program that would read it back off. So you would just type into one and it appears in the other. And then one thing I forgot to say when I come up here, if you guys have any comments, any questions or whatsoever, I kind of want to make this like a communicative just talk between us. So anything you want to talk about, any discussion, feel free to just say something, throw your water bottle at me, just get my attention. All right, so how does it work? This is, it looks, I made a diagram for such a simple program, but all we had is a network drive. That's the only thing that all the students could contact together, right? And then we also had, in order to allow certain users to do certain things, we used a permissions document. All the permissions were stored in a .mp4 so that I could hide actually what it was. So that was my first little tidbit in learning into just subverting real security methods. Not that it works too well. And then we had a single file for all chat rooms, basically just a text file with a whole bunch of lines of text in it. And then, like I said earlier, we had 2 programs, one read, one write, and these are students And you can see this beautiful diagram, I think gives the idea pretty well. So that's what gave us the name, cause and effect, right? So one program is our cause, the other is our effect. So, I can say hello, and actually this big screen is great because I can point things out. So, you see here, each line has like a little bit of text behind it because I didn't know how to filter that out. So this like ESO versus, let's see, there we go, broadcast, right? Down here at the bottom. That is how we actually filtered the text in the files. We just did a find string. And that leads me into how it actually works. I tried to diagram this program out, but it was such spaghetti code that I wrote as a middle schooler that it was actually impossible for me 10 years later to figure out how I even wrote it, because I also didn't use comments. So the program starts, and you say, is this testing? Is this not testing? You have to mash the T key fast enough in order to actually get into testing mode. And if it was testing, we'd set some test variables and then search for what version is. This program had version control. So I could, based on whatever my current program version was, it would actually go into the network drive and self-update itself. And then it would use your username. So it'd use like %username%, the Windows environment variable for your own user, and check for your permissions and figure out any kind of like configs you had, like your terminal color we had stored in a text file, had like your rank or role within our chat program. And it went through all this whole code, and then I actually stopped up here when you enter the room. So I'm just going to give an overview of the features that I wrote in this. Keep in mind, this isn't something I wrote quickly. This is something that took probably 4 years of just whatever random free time I had through middle school and high school. Eventually stopping about junior year when it got me suspended. But we had permissions management. And so we could add and remove access for domain users. So when I would type in someone's actual username in the Active Directory, it would add them to the file, because to everyone else it was denied. And then user management, again, we had roles, basic authentication, as in if your environment variable was correct for the username, it allowed you in. So realistically, you could hack that, because if you just change your environment username, suddenly you get all these other permissions that you didn't have before. We could save the preferences like I talked about earlier. Changing your color, it would save it between loads no matter what computer you were on. Kicking and banning users, it would check to see if you were in a ban file or a kick file. The dev environment that I talked about, filters, I had profanity. I actually wrote at the bottom, I wish I took a screenshot of it, but at the bottom of the program, I wrote down a whole list of profanities and then wrote an apology note to the teachers. It's like, I'm so sorry for writing all these out in a text document, but I have to put them here so people don't write them. And then as well, you could protect against spam. So, all of the 4 users that used it didn't send too many messages. So we had this low-level encryption. I'll show you that later, but it's something that it had. Chat rooms, kind of like what I talked about before, they were password secured, but if you open the text document, you could look at the password in plain text. Self-updating version control, talked about that. And then the number one rule we actually learned about earlier against, what was his name? The persistent threat who is trying to disable your system and encrypt it. Anyways, the number one way to protect against him is making backups. So it also had that. All right, so Paul from Ruoff, I was doing this last, I think, Tuesday night. I was running through this program, and Paul, being the great IT security person that he is, actually had a method of finding some very curious commands being run on my Windows machine, which happened to be owned by the company. So he actually caught me running my program and sent me an email the next day. He's like, hey, I'm guessing you were testing your program last night, huh? But it gave me a really perfect image of the different commands that I run and how they work. So we used find string a lot. This is all for different stuff. I used find string for finding the correct user in the permissions document, finding the correct chat room, or filtering out all of the different rooms together into your output. So you can see, RP is one room, and actually this is just the text document. That's how I stored the password. So the password was just tank. And then the default room, we actually defined all of the rooms as just separate lines, and then the chat started right below it. So it was really just a convoluted program that did one job, but if I learned one lesson out of it, you know, I just didn't let anything stop me. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but I programmed to my heart's content until I made something that was decent. All right. So yeah, I can go through it, and you know, these are just the different commands that are showing which different portions. I probably should have done that while I was standing over there, but it's all right. I've got a red circle. So, you know, you can see room is just selecting that specific room. We've got number 1 is the main room that's getting filtered out, and that's what's being displayed on the person's effect screen or their output. Same thing for that, and broadcast was a broadcast function that could actually send something to everyone's, you know, room. So there are a few problems that I learned about batch that are pretty unique. Batch doesn't really have functions. They have labels and they have goto. So you had a few methods of sending real variables off to a different function and then passing them back. And the only way to really do this is use a label and set a variable and then just use that variable within that label. And you run into issues because you have to clear that out or it's going to get pulled back in next time when you try to use it again. And so that was one of the reasons I couldn't diagram this out, because the spaghetti code, again, I just couldn't understand what was being cleared when, what variables were being passed through when. It was, you know, it's just hard to read, especially when there was not a single, these comments are actually what I was writing in while I was going through and making this presentation because I did not understand it. You also don't have arrays in batch. So you can kind of do this thing where you enable delayed expansion, where your variables can actually, you can create new variables with a variable in the name of the variable, if that makes sense. So I can title variable right here, right, L, and then I put this delayed expansion here, which is another variable, ID check counter, which eventually came into L1 through L like 1,000 for every single line of this text file that I'm inputting to it. And these are just some of the weird solutions that we have to come up with when we're given just limited functions and limited availability for a program. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about sort of just a little bit what happened during the time that we were using this program, and some close calls, some subversion techniques that we used to just get around the network admins and stay under their radar. So number 1 was just changing locations, because we'd have teachers who would question like, hey, why is this in my homework folder? Because when we submit homework, we submit it to a network drive, which was interesting. And obviously that's changed now, but you'd submit to their homework folder. So we found a teacher that didn't submit or didn't request any homework, but they had the folders there, so that's where we put it. And so, you know, these files were here, and I just, eventually they get found out. So I had a single file called just .location, and every day I'd change this location here, and everyone's program would look into a different location. So over time, our program is just jumping throughout the network, trying to just avoid being caught. It ended up working out pretty well. Eventually, I ended up getting myself in trouble for teaching someone else how to do this, and then they got in trouble, and then that came back to me. So lesson learned, just don't talk to other people. Encryption, go on to that. So this is a whole wall of text here, but I'll start here. So these are actually all my friends. I know some of these usernames still, some of them I don't talk to anymore, but I blanked them out because these actual values right here were their student IDs in school, and I don't want to show all that, but you can see mine. So I remember this like TCW put so you put, right? Whenever I'd see that, I know the encryption was working right, because I just remembered it for some reason. It basically turned, you know, you see these numbers here, it turned 7 into this, and so on. So, you know, 7 3 0 0 1 4 9 0. And then you can see there, like I was describing earlier, the roles, the permissions. I'm an admin, as you know, and a dev. So I gave myself definitely, you know, I wouldn't give my friends the admin until they really asked for it, because I wanted to be special. And you can see at the top, version 1.7, display version 1.3b, and that the program would look for that. If suddenly I change that, it would delete itself and download the new one. So if I entered a wrong value there, everyone's program could actually, it was sort of like a free self-destruct button. If I knew we were in trouble, I could change that to a different number and everyone's program would just delete itself next time it starts. Check for anything else on here. I think that's all that I wanted to talk about there. So, all right, the next thing I wanted to talk about was, I think, colors. So basically, the teachers would walk around, because these laptops, they were new, they didn't have a way to actually monitor our screens from the IT department. So they'd actually just walk around class, looking at our laptops. And eventually they would see the black and green text or the black and white text and notice, hey, that's not a normal screen color. And they recognize we're using command prompt, and they would shut that down as soon as they could. But if you just change it to a white background with black text, it turns out they really don't care. They just think it's a notepad document. So, yeah, that was just, simple subversion techniques that, it doesn't have to be perfect, but over time you add up all these little things that don't really matter too much, you get something that's okay. All right, Windows permissions. So I learned pretty early that I couldn't very easily perform privilege escalation as a network admin. So instead of doing that, I just removed permissions from the network admins to our documents. So all of our documents, we actually removed all the network admins from their permissions list. And suddenly, they don't see them anymore. I think domain admins are the only group that overrides that. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so we need, you need a very special account to see these, or you need to be on my friends list. And then you have all of these ICACLS, ICACLs, however you pronounce it. It's each different file. So we had a whole bunch of files, and then all of the updates for the programs, we'd have to update every single time we changed it. So I would just be sitting there all day watching this thing run through the whole list of users that I've added, and it audits them for me, right? So it would remove all user access, check the permissions document I wrote, re-add them all back. Okay, hidden files. So beauty lies in the files of the hidden folder. Basically, it's one of those things where if you're network admin, domain admin, you're going to see these. But if you're just another student browsing around, you may not see them. And ideally, we just want to get rid of every possible opportunity for someone to see our stuff, right? And just other students are really our worst enemy, because they like cool stuff, they see cool stuff, and they show other people that cool stuff, and then suddenly everyone knows what's going on and you get in trouble. Yeah, so we had these 5 main files, and most of them are hidden except .loc apparently. Whoops. Okay, gaming. Actually, I take that back. I forgot. There we go. So this file endings, right? I was talking about this a little bit earlier, but just by titling it .mp4, it confuses people, and they don't necessarily want to open it right away as a notepad document. I mean, if you check the MIME type of it, it's going to be obvious what it is, but it's just one more step to just get past, some sort of detection. So gaming, this is actually in batch. I don't know why it's titled knife game. There are no knives, but they're just blocks falling from the sky. So each one of these tiles coming down is actually pre-rendered, and it's the same exact pattern over and over and over again, but it's still some sort of a game, and it was kind of fun. So you see, you get a score and you type in your name, and we had a high scores table, which was another notepad document. So this is what that looked like. A really interesting solution we had is to actually create where the player is on the bottom of the screen. I actually just called it player position 1 through 15. So all these spaces where it kind of looks like a pyramid, that's just like adding another space to it. And because Terminal has equal spacing between each character, it just works out. And then this is the game board. I don't know if any of you have seen IT Crowd, but game board. Sorry. So this whole this is really just a whole list of echoes, and this keeps on going for quite a while after this, but I didn't have word wrap enabled. And then at the bottom, we have our health bar, which is 5 through 1. Again, just 5 different variables or 5 different if functions. But yeah, that's the whole game board right there. Like, this is from top to bottom what you are seeing up there. And there's nothing else in it other than resetting, every single frame, reset knife game B6 versus C6, D6, and all the way down. So with that, that's actually everything I had specifically to talk about. I realize I'm about 10 minutes short, but this is a word cloud of the program if you're interested. Apparently I wrote a lot of sets, but if you guys just want to have any kind of a discussion about batch, any weird solutions that I came up with, any weird solutions you guys have come up with using batch in your organizations, I'm just going to open this up to free talk and see where this goes. Yeah.
How long did it take you to edit the score table the first time? Put yourself at the top.
Oh, yeah. It was probably about 1 day in when someone got past me and I just couldn't. So I went ahead and edited the document. It's not allowed. It also didn't really sort, so I always made sure to take my name and just always put it at the top, even if it wasn't the bottom or the top number. And this reminds me, I may as well go off on another tangent because that's all the presentation really is. But I worked at a company, Fort Wayne Wired-Eye, if anyone remembers or has seen that down in Southwest Fort Wayne. But we were doing a domain migration, and we were upgrading from Windows Server 2000 to 2008. And we needed a method of making sure that all of the Active Directory records, sorry, it's been so long since I've used it. ADSF, I can't remember the name. Anyway, sorry. There are all the records on the back end of Active Directory that we needed to remove before it could actually upgrade, because all these like zombie or orphan records were in there, and it would not let you upgrade to the next environment until those are gone. And so we actually created this batch script that every single time we'd run through the sandbox and test this, it would remove everything, upgrade the environment for us, all in batch. So it's very useful, especially when you're working in a Windows environment, but it is very, very slow sometimes. And the lack of functions is pretty difficult. But yeah, that was just something I had remembered, another use for it I had in the past. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you got suspended. You didn't mention that they wanted to expel you.
That's my dad.
And part two, I'm just now realizing how, I remember being in there defending you because of this little thing, and I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, is anyone from Southwest Allen County Schools here? Uh-oh. So, all right. It doesn't really matter too much, I'll say it. So basically, I got in trouble for accessing something on the network that genuinely I probably shouldn't have copied, right? But at the time, I was like 16. I had no idea. It had my friends' birthdays in it, so I copied it, and it was cool. I know my friends' birthdays now. But it also, that's sensitive data. So that got me in huge trouble because I showed someone else how to get on the network drive because nothing was actually secured. It was all like accessible by any user in the domain. You could copy these and read these files. Anyways, this was the whole start of that. I taught people how to just use CMD and how to open up network drives, and suddenly this became a whole thing that we just wanted to build together. And now we're just chatting every day about what we want to do next, what we're doing in our games at the time, and what our next Minecraft server is going to be. So it was definitely experience. I got in trouble for it. So it was 2 weeks suspension, I believe. Came back the next semester just fine. But I learned so much in that moment of there is a limit to what you can do. Having a hacker's mindset is okay, but you have to know your limits. I crossed that line, and I think that was a great time to cross that line because that's not really going to affect me much in the future. But now I know what I need to look for, and sort of, like I said, those limits. And now, I'm doing things that, like at Ruoff, Paul gave me the artistic creativity and the artistic outlet to just play with Ansible, right? How many of you have used Ansible or infrastructure as code? Okay, I'll give a brief recap. Ansible is a scripted YAML language that you can basically deploy an entire server environment with. And Paul let me just run rampant with that and deploy so many of our development servers, UAT servers, and then eventually prod servers with this script that just saves so much time every single time we got to do it. But just being able to bash at a problem with all these different solutions, it really, really benefited me in the end. All right, are there any other questions out there? Yeah.
So I have a less technical question. Obviously, cybersecurity, this realm, it's going to be very in demand. People to build things, and people to break things, right? To think differently, all that stuff.
Right.
So, to people with kids that are like, hey, I've got a son who's really good at diving into something and being analytical and breaking stuff. I mean, like you said, there's great power and danger associated with it. So as you try to seek to protect your kids from what's on the internet, but potentially teach them how to break those safeguards at the same time, that's a big question to ask. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely giving an environment to learn in is such a great opportunity. Having internships where I've been given the freedom to roam and sort of make my own solutions, not being micromanaged, has helped me so much. And I'm so happy with the employers I've had because they just let me sort of have free reign over what I'm doing. And then we end up making a solution that works out better than, whatever else we could have done having it been, if it was scrutinized. But yeah, I think definitely there is, sorry, my brain is running faster there. Sorry, my mouth is running faster than my brain. Definitely with school children who are trying to get into IT and want to, develop this hacker mindset and just play with things. I think a lot of times they get shut down. And I think we need to be more okay with just letting them mess around for a bit, tell them, hey, you kind of messed up, but then give them the opportunities and the platform to play with and learn from. And I think online, there are so many online tools now, like Code Academy, W3 Schools. I actually haven't looked at many things recently, but there are a whole forensics labs you can do online, and there are a whole capture the flags. The thing Brian made just for today for the capture the flag, and just practicing with things like that in a controlled environment are just so great. Yeah. Yeah.
So just to kind of bounce up, at any point during this, did anybody try to redirect this energy from you?
No.
To do more creative? Oh, okay.
Nope. It was shut down pretty heavily. And actually, I think they had joked at one point during the expulsion meeting of, oh, maybe we should just hire you and help secure our network. And they're like, ha ha ha, funny joke. I'm like, yeah, really? Maybe. That didn't happen. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate your attention. I recognize this is a little different of a presentation compared to the rest of them. I hope you're able to pull something from it, and I'll still be around for a little while after this if you have any questions. So thank you guys so much, and have an awesome day.